Hello YouTube, I am back at the Wet Spot Tropical Fishes warehouse, and today we're gonna look at plecos. I got tons of cool species, so if you're a pleco lover, this is the video for you. So there's a lot of cool species like the leopard frog plecos here, but we've all seen them, so we're just gonna focus on the less common species like the slate pleco here that we don't see very often. What can you tell us about these guys?
This fish is super cool. So this is Audacanthus ganasetiger, the slate pleco. These guys have only really recently kind of re-entered the hobby, it seems like, if they were ever there to start. If memory serves, these look about 6-7 inches long, seem to be pretty hardy. Interesting little fellows, will do some algae eating, but the pattern is fascinating. A lot of us are probably familiar with, the black plecos with white spots, like your galaxies, your vampires, your stardust, your snowballs, all that good stuff. But these guys, it's this really odd, almost like stippled pattern. These guys are really interesting, and they don't have an L number. Somebody asked me once, Cameron, what L number are these? And I said, they don't have one. These were scientifically described in, I believe, 1941, so way before we needed to use any fancy designations like L numbers to figure out what these guys are. But I think they're really pretty. Once settled, the contrast is even better on these guys. I'm just glad to have them back. We have only gotten a few shipments of these, so every time that happens with a new and rare fish and they're gone, I always get a little nervous, like, oh man, when are we going to see those guys again? And I hope these stick around, because I think they're really neat.
It's nice to see them out in the light.
Yeah.
You don't really see that often with plecos. All right, what do we got down here?
So we got a twofer. We have Picoltia broweri, the Wormline Pleco, also known as L135. I believe it might also be L121. It's one of those cases where the L numbers are kind of the same fish. These guys get only about 4.5–5 inches long. Beautiful fish. They have this really fascinating wormline pattern on the face, which I think is really cool. You don't really see other plecos with that, and then the body is going to have these really nice orange highlights to them. Has been spawned several times in captivity. Just not the most common fish overall, not necessarily as flashy or has the name brand cachet of, say, like a phantom, so not seen as much, but a really wonderful fish. I've always really enjoyed taking care of these guys. They seem to eat darn near everything you throw at them. Might help with some algae cleanup. I personally don't care if my plecos do any sort of job, but I know some folks appreciate it. But I think these are just a really beautiful fish, and of course we have several of them in here right next to these inspectors up on the wall, which is another favorite of mine.
Okay, yeah, oh, there they are. Anything interesting about the inspectors?
Yeah, so these should be, as far as I can tell, the true inspector pleco, Hypancistris inspector. That is their species epithet, L102. They're not the Colombian ones that you'll see oftentimes come in as the inspector pleco. Kind of a big lunker for a Hypancistris. These ought to get up to 6 inches. They might be my favorite pleco. I have several of these at home that I'd like to try spawning. I think they're beautiful. I know right now they might look similar to like a vampire, a lot of the other black and white plecos that you see, but I think what really sets these apart is when they're settled, kind of that like milky whitish gray, almost galaxy look to them stays in addition to the jet black and the white spots. I think they're stunning. I think they're awesome. I think they're just a really cool pleco, and you don't see those very often either. A lot more popular hype bands in the hobby.
All right, so this has always been a personal favorite of mine, the L239. I just think they're a beautiful pleco with that blue stripe on the fins. What do you know about these?
I know that I love them, and I know that this fish can be a little tricky to keep. Not all Barancistus are tremendously easy to keep long-term in an aquarium. I know a lot of the time these are called the blue panache. We have them labeled as such, but they aren't a panache. They're not one of those big lunkers. These guys are awesome. They're beautiful, stay quite small. I believe the biggest I've ever seen was about 4 inches. And once they're settled, they do get a stunning velvety blue appearance to them. A lot of the time when they're hiding under logs, you do have to squint quite a bit to see them. But main keys to success for these guys is going to be giving them frequent feedings, varied, so you have some animal protein in there, you have some more plant or algal based food in there, but just quite a bit of it, and I definitely recommend keeping these guys warm. A lot of plecos do like to be kept hot, especially ones from the Xingu, a lot of the fancy ones that we see out of Brazil, but these in particular, I would say long term, probably not a bad call to keep them on the upper range of at least 82, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. I know that might exclude certain other fish from being kept with them, but it's such a beautiful fish, and it would be a shame to lose them. So I do recommend keeping them as such, just because they're such a fantastic creature, and it seems like they do need definitely a bit of water flow and that heat to them to do their best and to look their best.
Yeah, I can kind of start seeing the hints of blue on these guys. And clearly I butchered the scientific name. Can you repeat it for me?
I say it Barancistus begini or begini. Common name is the blue Panache or Panache, however you want to say that, but they're certainly not in that genus, so a lot of different ways to refer to them.
This is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful plecos, the L75.
I love this fish. I think I call them sabajis. I believe Mark's actual name is Sabah. That's how you pronounce that. Sorry if I butchered that. This might have been the first fancy quote-unquote pleco I ever kept. They do get big. Eventually can reach almost 10 inches. These are the Brazilian ones. They are L75. There's also the Colombian ones, which are L124. Very out and about. I love how personable this fish is. I always get to see him when I keep him. A good friend of mine has a very large one that will attach itself right to the front of the glass in his tank. Will eat some algae, pretty varied diet. They'll eat darn near whatever you throw at them. And when they grow, the orange you get, the beautiful leopard pattern on them is incredible. Beautiful, beautiful fish, especially when they're big. I know some folks fear having like a larger fish in their tank, but man, having a big one of these is always such an impressive sight. Love, love, love these guys. I think it's a great fish, great pleco, and pretty darn hardy. A lot of these guys can have reputations for the wild-caught plecos as being a bit sensitive, but these are ones that just keep trucking along. I've never had a problem with them.
So for the people looking, this would be the L... What's that one? Because that's not the 75, right?
That's going to be the 75, and then the bigger guys that are a bit more yellowy right now are going to be Picoltia vittata, the candy stripes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The vittatas will be that.
Backwards.
Yeah, and then the 75s will be magnificent. They'll have, no offense, vittata, they'll have better orange as adults.
Yeah, way back in the day I had a small group of them, and I've always wanted them again, probably like 10 years ago. So the 3 beacon pleco, L91. See if we can find one. There we go. I just love the color on the fins there, and the jet black body. What can you tell us about these?
I can tell you that this is another good quote-unquote starter. I found them to be quite hardy. A lot of the Audacanthus, in my opinion, are pretty easy to care for. Can get a little bit territorial with themselves or other plecos when they do eventually get big. They're very slow growers. They're carnivores. They're not going to do squat for algae, any sort of cleaning, but they look really cool, and I always like to think of it as they're fancy. It's like taking a Ferrari to the grocery store. You can do it, but maybe not the best use of resources there from a utility standpoint. I've kept these many times. I love them. That jet black body is magnificent. The red you see on them is great. A little bit more shy during the daytime for sure, but an eager feeder. Never had a problem keeping these guys with really anything else, so long as you give them a few caves here and there. And yeah, 3 beacon pleco is also, I think, just a fantastic common name. Really hard to beat that.
Come on.
And, you know, worst case scenario, if you just see a really pretty tail and a few fins poking out of a log, it's still pretty darn good looking, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good looking fish. All right, so here's a new one for me that I haven't seen. What are these guys?
These are Panache schaefferi, the Volkswagen pleco. I'm going to guess that they got that name because when they get big, they sure seem to be about the size of a VW Beetle. L203, I believe these are also designated as L90C. Much like most of your Panaches, they come in as cute little buggers, and over time will grow into a magnificent show specimen that is also really, really, really big. I cannot overstate both how slow these guys grow, but also how big they'll eventually get. I think the maximum recorded size on schaefferi is like 20 inches. Would not surprise me if they can get bigger. So they're awfully cute right now. I do love this fish. I love all the royals. But because they are so far off from their adult size, you got to do some prepping in advance. But really neat patterning on these guys. I think these might be one of my favorite of the royals. Just a big fish for a dedicated fish keeper. I know the royals do have a ton of personality for all of them. I've kept a couple reasonably sized specimens in my time before moving them onward to a buddy with bigger aquariums than I do, and they can become pretty tame. I like these guys a lot.
Yeah, it's a pretty fish. Well, here's some chunky plecos. What do we got here?
So we have L190, the big guys, the quote-unquote common Royal Pleco. One that you'll most commonly see, those are of course still yet babies. Those are also going to get pretty darn big. I believe maximum size 15, 16 inches on those. So they're big now. They're still yet babies. Great fish, wood eater, but of course they'll suck down everything I've ever thrown at them. Once again, very personable, very pretty, that kind of mint green striping along with the black. And then behind them, the flat fellows are one of my favorite plecos. Those are Pseudolithoxis anthrax, the flat flyer out of Colombia.
It's looking really good right here.
Kind of a very squat, like anchor-shaped body is how I think of it. Very spiny little fellows. This looks to be a nice male. You can tell because his pectorals shoot out so far and they're so covered with odontodes. These are going to be from faster flowing areas, so you do want to keep them clean. But I think they're wonderful fish. Pretty adaptable. I found them to be pretty hardy. Don't need to be quite as hot as a lot of the fancy plecos for best effect. They're also typically not quite as expensive as some of the other guys, which I think is nice too, because they look really good. They have plenty of personality. I've got a couple pretty large ones about this size at home that I always see. I never have to struggle to be like, oh, what cave is he in? What piece of wood is he hiding under? These guys seem to be out and about quite a bit. I just think they're really neat, fascinating body shape, good color to boot. And a little bit out there as well for those that like something a little bit off the beaten path.
They are really flat. What's the max size?
I'd say probably 6-7 inches.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all.
It's doable. All right, what do we got here? This is a new one for me too. I've never seen these guys.
So this is a great fish. Plecostomus have been maligned for many reasons, valid and not. And a lot of us probably at some point have kept a common Plecostomus or maybe bought something labeled as Hypostomus Plecostomus. Without boring everyone with the etymology behind all this, I'll say that I love the genus Hypostomus. They do poop a little bit. They are typically very good algae eaters, just like you would hope out of a fish that is going to be in that genus. And these are no exception. These are Hypostomus soniae. Sometimes they're called the red Bruno or the violet Bruno Pleco or the blue-eye Pleco, one of them. These guys will get a nice green body, get bright, I mean just cobalt blue eyes, stunning fish. Red fins, and only top out at about 7-8 inches would be stout. Beautiful fish, does a little bit of a job. Not always the easiest to find, but I kind of stumbled upon these years ago and they've been one of my favorites ever since. They become so pretty, they're very hardy, they do a job. It's really hard to think of negatives with these guys. But
they almost look scaleless.
Mm-hmm.
Very smooth looking. They're very, a very unique Pleco for me.
Very cool look, and we've been lucky enough to get a couple other members of this genus in, and I've loved all of them. I think they're packed with personality. I cannot recommend them enough, especially for people that don't like it when their Plecos hide all the time, because that does not describe this fish really at all.
And then there's a contaminant in here, so if anyone knows what that thing is, let us know in the comments. All right, looks like we got a couple species in here, and I really like the gold tigers here. What can you tell us about these?
Yeah, so this is going to be Panache SP LDA01, first Pleco with that LDA number designation. These guys, like a lot of Panache, are going to be a pretty little fish. Don't get too big. I believe max size on these is going to be about 4 inches. Fairly varied diet. Beautiful color. I think that these guys, if memory serves, are going to come from the Rio Tapajós in Brazil. I think they're awesome. I mean, that orange just really shines through. Nice black contrast. Good amount of personality. I'm currently keeping one of their close relatives at home, L398, which is one of my favorites.
I have those too.
Beautiful fish.
Tanky?
Yep, love my Tonkai. But these guys are no exception to the rule. I mean, that great orange, great black on them, and you can, as you can see, they're actually out and about, or at least somewhere where you can poke and squint and say, oh, look at that guy, he looks great. I always love watching my Panache rush out to devour whatever I've offered them in the evening. It's always a good touching base with one of my favorites.
Clearly getting enough food because it's all over the place here. What's the other one in here?
The other guys in here are going to be Ancestris claro.
Oh, okay.
The gold marble bushy nose, designation LDA 08. These are quite variable, it seems like, both between males and females, as well as the location that they're caught. They are an Ancestris, but they stay fairly small. Memory serves, only about 3.5 inches long. at maximum size. They do spawn at smaller sizes like most of your Ancestris. These are a pretty desirable one. A lot of folks are after a lot of the really crazy color patterns that you'll get out of them. So there's a lot of folks out there that do try to spawn them as well to try to sell those. I think it's a very pretty fish, depending on where they came from, and I don't know which location looks the best or really how to tell them apart. You see a lot of variation in them. Very interesting little fish.
Okay, in my opinion, this is one of the best looking plecos. Of course, I say that about every pleco, but these guys especially, the L114. Tell us about these guys.
Yeah, so these are a Audacanthus, so they're going to be another kind of spinier guy, more carnivorous in diet. These are L114, the redfin sternella is the common name on them. Eventually can get pretty large. I've heard as large as 9-10 inches, although they're very, very slow growing. Unfortunately, a bit more of a secretive fish. This is not one to bank on if you like seeing your pleco all the time. You can see a couple down there. There's a few in this tube, but beautiful color, that bright orange fin. You've got that gold leopard patterning on it. Beautiful, beautiful fish. Very tricky to spawn. Most people don't even work with Audacanthus because of the size that they get, because of the long period of time it can take to get them to reproductive size, and also they are a bit combative, just like Audacanthus can be. So not always the most popular one, so a breeding challenge for sure, but a stunning pleco no matter what. I mean, that's gorgeous, and they're going to look like that throughout their whole life.
All right, what do we got here?
So this is yet another one of my favorites, Panache albivermis, the pinstripe panique, or the flash pleco, or the emperor pleco, or L204. A million different ways to talk about these guys. I love these. I love these to death. They do poop a lot. That is about the worst thing I can say about them. They're typically inexpensive. They're rare enough that it's always a delight to see them, but they're common enough that most folks should be able to get their hands on them. The markings can be very variable. There's some varieties that have quite a bit more spawning on the body. As adults, the striping does tend to fade just a little bit with intensity, but it will end up bigger, which is always nice. Maximum size of 4 inches, and then you have those beautiful trailers on them. This is, I think, one of the most out and about plecos you could ask for. I remember one I had for many, many years that I loved to death. That guy would dive bomb any sort of pellet that I dropped in there, off the wood or off the glass. I love this fish. They're not commonly bred just because of how easily they're found for the most part, but I think these are wonderful. They fit in a huge variety of tanks. Not too bad to spawn if that's what you're into. The trailers are fantastic. It's just a great little pleco.
Yeah, I love these. These are really beautiful.
And extremely hardy. Some populations come from a offshoot of the Rio Ucayali in Peru, where the pH can be as high as 8.5.
Wow.
So when I was living in Indiana and the water was rock hard, these guys were not batting an eye. They were totally fine with it.
That's good information. All right, one of my all-time favorite fish since I was a kid, the Royal Farella. Tell us about these.
Oh, you know, coincidentally, me too. I love the Royal Farellas. These are going to be wild caught from Colombia. A lot of confusion in terms of species. They look very similar. Most of the time they'll be exported as Panamense or as Aureus, and sometimes you'll see Aureus, sometimes you'll see Laytoni, or who knows what other species that do show up with these guys, but fortunately care is pretty similar. Maximum size maybe 6-7 inches, kind of stout body. Wonderful trailers. The fins can get super long, especially on males, and pretty hardy. Farellas are one of my other favorites, this kind of common twig catfish, but can be a lot trickier to take care of for most folks, and these guys are a lot more adaptable. They seem to take prepared food a lot more. They seem to be a bit less nervous and skittish. They're a sight to see. I know a lot of people, they even keep these as like kind of a highlight pleco in a discus tank, so to speak. Just them chilling on a big Amazon sword or on a log looking fantastic. I love these guys.
Just a really cool looking fish. All right, thank you, Cameron, for showing us your current collection of plecos. If you like any of these fish, check out wetspot.tropicalfish.com. Use code Steenfott10 to get 10% off your entire order, minus shipping. And yeah, any final words from you? Or
Plecos are really neat, and they are still yet technically catfish, so I am obligated to love them, but we're always really lucky to have a pretty wide spread of both what you'd expect to see and a few oddballs here and there that are always really nice to see in the flesh.
There you go.